test the mic very quickly. Is everything good? Okay, thank you. I was going to do this in a minute, but just jumping off of that, have to express my appreciation to, of course, these lovely women here, and also to Chef Rogers and Danielle. I hope you are somewhere here, but for doing this, for giving young researchers like us, PhDs like us, a chance. So thank you so much for taking the chance on me. Daniela has been hyping me up a lot throughout this conference. Thank you so much. We'll see if I live up to the hype, but if I don't, I'll just throw you under the bus. I'm sorry. So no, I cannot even begin expressing how encouraged and validated and supported I feel to be doing this. I had my very first chat presentation last year, and if you had told me back then that I would be doing this as a keynote next year, I would have laughed in your face. But this is incredible, and I'm so thankful to each one of you, and also to everyone in the Zoom room. I'm very happy I can see how many of you are there, but I'm really happy and really grateful for you all for turning up today. Thank you so much. Okay. Oh, also, have to do this a little shout out to my team in Munster. I'm really happy most of them could be here. Yes. I owe them lots of drinks and some sanity. And Evie, I count you, even though you're forever Team Munster, even though you're not there anymore. For being here, and of course, Corinna, she's being missed. She has helped me a lot throughout my PhD journey, of course. Most of us know how great she is. So thank you to Corinna just for being who she is. Corinna, you're being missed. Okay. So, as Daniela said, my name is Swara. I'm originally from Delhi in India, now pretending to be a German. I'm based in the University of Munster and currently writing my PhD thesis on digital serialization. So if you've met me in the past 4 days, you've heard that word a lot coming from me. And you will be hearing more of it in the next 30 or so minutes. So I will let the talk kind of put things in order, contextualize the title itself. So I won't go into too much of this, but basically my talk today is trying to look at the reading cultures around this kind of serialization through a heuristic exploration of Wattpad. Oh, sorry. Now, to introduce Wattpad to you, I would first like to talk a little bit about serialization, also Wattpad, in terms of the thematic concerns of materialities, collaborations, access that this field has been encouraging us to think about. And I feel like the idea of collaboration, how collaborative can the writing and publishing process really be? What kind of new channels of access can digital platforms like Wattpad open into the publishing space? Also a little bit of materialities. Where do we position the tangibility of the book format as against or in juxtaposition to a serial format? All of these, I think, are pretty ingrained in my own inquiry into Wattpad and the topics I try to look at through my PhD. So I was really happy to get the invitation. Thank you very much. And I think hopefully some of these thematic concerns I can contribute my own 2 cents to the incredible discussions we've been having so far. Now I'll begin introducing Wattpad to you through, as one does, a story, or maybe 3 stories. Back in 2012, a young author named Brittany Greer-Gottlieb, so that one there, tried and failed to land a literary agent through traditional querying routes. She decided to start uploading her story on a social reading and writing platform called Wattpad because she was, in her own words, desperate to find readers. The readers that she generated on the platform, or more accurately speaking, the reads that she garnered on the platform, eventually caught the attention of the very publishers and the literary agents that she had unable to get access to originally. Eventually, she landed a 3-book publishing deal with Simon & Schuster. Fast forward a few years, moving to the second screenshot. In 2012, a US-based independent publisher called Source Books started a hashtag on the Wattpad platform called Submit to Source Books to allow the Wattpad users to pitch their romance stories to the publisher. The result was a 2-book romance series called The Undead Dating Service by, and I hope I'm pronouncing this correctly, Juliet Lyons. And this collaboration lasted beyond the lifetime of the hashtag itself, when Wattpad directed Source Books to a story called Chasing Red, which had become the most read story of 2016. Source books published Chasing Red in the book format in 2017. Notable here also is that ad revenues on Wattpad only started around 2016, so the platform at this time was largely unmonetized. So during these early forays into the traditional book world, Wattpad's co-founder and current CEO, Alan Lau, had said, and I'm going to be paraphrasing him here, that he did not intend to disrupt publishing itself, but rather to disrupt the reading and the writing processes by lowering the conventional barriers between the two. My takeaway from this is the positioning of this lowered barrier as an intervention into the traditional publishing industry, which I see as both disrupting and reinforcing the foothold of traditional publishers and traditional book formats that we see today, especially in the Anglophone book world, which is my focus. This originally lowered barrier, while ostensibly making the blueprint for Wattpad's growth into a platform publisher, is slightly more complicated in its current iteration, which is what we see on the slide right now. For one, the platform itself has become steadily more monetized through various programs, and I will be talking about one of them later. And secondly, in 2019, Wattpad launched its own book publishing division called Wattpad Books, following an acquisition by a South Korean company in 2021. It merged with the comic portal Webtoon to form now the Wattpad Webtoon Book Group. And as of mid-2023, the book group had about 4 imprints within it and about 60 plus book publications. So this means that this increasingly monetized platformed access has also become part of the gatekeeping and acquisition channels into the traditional book market or into traditional book publishers. The number of reads, a quantifier of this access and subsequent engagement, has become a currency in traditional codex-driven bookmaking processes, and that's what the platform publisher seems to be leveraging. So this is very broadly speaking, a quick overview of how the next few minutes will be looking like. I will contextualize the platform, as I keep saying, as a platform publisher. Just a note on some of the terms I've used here. Remediation, as most of you might know, I'm borrowing from Bolton and Cruzen. I don't work too closely with that concept. My main agenda, to use the word and the methodology, is to try and draw some trans-historic continuities from the historical serial market, especially the Victorian serial market, that makes my historical precursor. And a little one more shout out to Federico Pianzola. I don't think he's here, but he has attended Sharp before. In his work in digital social reading, he used Marginalia for the reader comments, the inline reader comments on the platforms that are anchored to the text. And that's where I got the idea and started exploring the reading there through this lens. And that's what I'll be proposing a little bit of today. Okay. I have here a very quick visualization of where I position Wattpad as a platform publisher, and I just saw Simone Murray there, hello. The book publication I discussed, the book publications I discussed just a few slides ago showed us both a conglomerate publisher as well as a smaller independent publisher, both looking to a platformed process of reading as a way to construct or indicate a sort of preemptive market value for them to invest in. I find this to be a similar or a comparable logic that also underscores, for example, BookTok translating into shelves in brick and mortar bookstores today, or a certain Goodreads review bombing controversy canceling traditional publishing deals for a certain Kate Koran. I hope most of you know what I'm talking about. If you don't, please fall into that rabbit hole, it's great. So digital channels, and especially digital consumption logics, as well as their algorithmic visibility and recordability, are ostensibly informing decisions out in the print world. Wattpad leveraging this to create its own in-house publishing ecosystem, then creates a platform-dependent publishing model which makes these platformed processes directional, mediated, and governed by a logic of print-based commodification. Serialization is the dominant strategy on the platform, with uploads being made chapter by chapter. And the text is also optimized for a serialized reading experience. And I was really hoping for Claire Parnell to be here. She does some amazing work with Wattpad there. So shout out to her. I don't know if you're on the Zoom room, but thank you for the work you do, Claire. So the pricing system for monetized serials is also done chapter by chapter. And each chapter or installment or web page has its own set of metrics, including the number of reads or views, number of votes, and number of comments. So all platformed practices, particularly reading practices, are shaped by and facilitated by this logic, this process of serialization. Again, given the visibility paradigms of reading and readers, depending on how we approach them, these ostensibly articulate a reading experience facilitated by either serialized composition or serialized distribution of the texts on the platform. And these create the accruable, snowballable, if I may use that word, metrics that traditional publishers find so desirable. This is where I situate this platformed serialized reading engagement in relation to and in interaction with traditional book cultures. Okay. So this view of serialization generates reading practices as intervention, as intervening in the decision-making processes of traditional publishers. And this particular process has a well-known precursor in the historical Victorian serial market. Laurel Brake positions the periodical-driven serials as, and I quote, a trial and error space that volume publishers at the time often looked to before deciding on investing in new authors, because the volume formats were laborious and more expensive to publish and produce. This is the process that gave us, for example, authors like Wilkie Collins, there, who was serialized initially when he was not a known author. He was serialized anonymously, and therefore created a name for himself, both literally and figuratively in this case, by accruing and sustaining excitement, anticipation, and eagerness. So most of you might know he often wrote whodunits and very long ones at that. And he wrote what were known then as sensation novels, which was a genre that really lent itself to the serialized format. And this perhaps helps to contextualize the suspense and the periods of waiting around its original serial form. George Eliot, herself a popular serial author at the time, had called these gaps between installments periods of, and I'm quoting here, eager idleness. This indicated a readership that was not passive, that was anticipatory, and that was consistently engaged. This eager readership is what contributed to building a preemptive, indicative market value that the volume publishers of the time then invested in. So I visualize this as a pathway that specifically flows from the serial form to the book form. And I know that Asha Rogers in her keynote said something about decentering the book, and I'm doing completely the opposite here. I'm recentering the book, so sorry about that. And this particular workflow, this particular path flow of publishing then culminates or converges into a product that participates in the traditional book market. And I further conceptualize this, I like to call this the culminated book. And I approach this through Janice Radcliffe's quote there, wherein the culminated book becomes a result of a highly mediated, serialized process preceding it, and therefore is positioned as an end product. Okay. So as I said, a large part of my conceptualization of this directional view of serialization lies in remediation, as both Poulter and Grusin had conceptualized it, to draw transhistoric continuities to frame this anticipatory and engaged serialized reading process, which is now conveniently numerically constructed by the Wattpad platform, and their ostensible participation in the gatekeeping paradigms of Wattpad's traditional publishing arm. As a little connector to the previous slide, Margaret Atwood joined the platform back in 2012, and some of you may know her as someone who has always advocated for digital interventions and digital platforms in the publishing space. And she had said about the platform back then, and I quote, like Dickens during his serial publication of Pickwick Papers, Wattpad writers get feedback from readers and may shape their stories accordingly. We also have Sarah Tandarup-Linkis here. Told you I'll be quoting you, who has explored a story that Atwood serialized on the platform with author Naomi Campbell and has used that to draw correlations between serial reading and social reading. What I like to think about here is that a lot of Atwood's advocacy at the time relied on, and this is a word she often used, democratic access to literature and to readers that the platform provided them before its eventual commercial and product-focused growth. Also interestingly, at the same time, her support of the platform was commonly expressed in relation to traditional publishers. For example, she had applauded the disruptive nature of Wattpad as a platform, and I'm quoting here, that built itself under the radar of traditional publishers, while simultaneously maintaining the position of the traditional as a culmination point, again quoting her here, in my view, Wattpad is not a replacement for traditional publishers, but a gateway leading to them. Keeping this in mind, if I can then direct your attention to the top, no, that's not it, top right corner, that shows you a YA book published by the book group in 2020 called Entwined. Entwined was serialized on the platform between 2018 and 2019. The serial installment, I hope that's visible for everyone. The serial installment, or in this rubric, the web page, has its own set of metrics that you can see on the top of the text to create a concurrent installment-based or serialized articulation of reading, which then contributes to the publishing decisions for the culminated book. So this platform to traditional publishing flow gives us a similar directionality and a similar reader-focused metric of decision-making that we saw in the previous slide in regards to the volume publishers. On the other side of things, public-facing content from the company, often targeted at creators who are authors hoping to monetize from the platform, are also emphasized on the algorithmic desirability of serialization in relation to building a returning, invested, a loyal readership. And this also further indicates and constructs a rubric of what I call the serialized reading process. Okay. Now looking further into how this clearly desirable practice of serialized reading on the platform is narrativized in relation to the traditional book. Ashley Gardner, the former publishing chief at Wattpad, had been at the forefront of the operations of the book group when it launched back in 2019. And during her advocacy, during her public-facing statements back then, she used the narrative around the book group and to construct the book as a discernible, distinct, textual, and aesthetic object. Phrases like your favorite Wattpad books, your favorite Wattpad story in an easy-to-hold book are also recurring in the promotional language of the time and indicate an effort at incentivizing and translating the invested platformed reading behavior into a traditional codex-driven purchase behavior. I also see this as a move towards leveraging, at the risk of sounding a bit bleak here, a sort of sunk cost mentality that's enmeshed in this kind of serialized reading process. Framing the publishing process as a journey of the story that the users on the platform are invested in changes and moves the goalpost for this kind of reading process. It constructs the book format as something for the platform reader to aspire to and to lay claim over. Other narratives, like the screenshot of the Forbes article that I have here at the bottom, also further this construction of reader agency by foregrounding book publishing decisions in reader choices. This, however, is problematized, I think, in the increasingly commercialized capitalistic framework of Wattpad that we see today. For example, trans-platform user-facing spaces like Wattpad subreddits that I love going into have shown an increasing dissatisfaction with the recommendations algorithm, which seems to be aimed at a more commercial logic than individualized reading behavior. And another shout out to Claire Parnell here. She's written a brilliant article a few months ago on these discoverability algorithms that I would definitely recommend. On my part, this strand still requires a bit of more exploration, but the question I intend to put forth with this is the problematization of reader choice and reader agency. Within a platform culture that is becoming clearly more streamlined towards the traditional book market, are these choices on the platform already pre-made for the readers? Are they defined by larger traditional agendas? My takeaway here is also this constructed narrativized platform reader. This platform reader indirectly participates in the larger traditional market. And I want to begin exploring this or approaching this with a view to their purported involvement in acquisition and gatekeeping channels for the traditional book format. Which brings me to Marginalia. So I'm introducing a framework of Marginalia to approach these reader metrics, and especially these reader metrics as intervening in traditional bookmaking processes. A couple of slides ago, I mentioned Sarah Tandro-Plinkis, who links social and serial reading. So that does half my job by placing the socialization aspect in context. And I'm using here for Marginalia studies, I'm using here Edgy Jackson's comprehensive study on historical and archived marginalia in print cultures. Now, there are a few conditions of value making and reader articulation that marginalia evidences in print cultures. Simply put, marginalia refers to any mark or material in the margins that's incidental to the text. So by nature, marginalia is defined through its conditions of visibility. Its adoption into literature and literary cultures date back to 1819, when Samuel Coleridge published his notes and annotations in Blackwood's Edinburgh magazine. This defined the genre of marginalia studies in many ways. For one, it brought these notes, these annotations, from a primarily private sphere to a public sphere. This expanded the extant social and shareable dimension of these notes that Jackson also has explored by citing many historical instances where marked books or annotated books were shared amongst friends and reading groups. Secondly, and more importantly for my considerations, it created the possibility of capitalizing on these notes to, and I quote Edgy Jackson again, change the conditions under which the readers wrote these notes, end quote. Third, these notes, scribbles, marks, articulated an extent of reader agency by claiming space in the codex, and by adding a voice distinct and separate from the author, whether aesthetically, whether tonally, or typographically. A lot of the social dimension that I've attempted to summarize here very, very briefly and broadly is fulfilled by the data economy of the platform, which aims to accumulate reads and readers. And these are most prominently or more obviously visible in the commenting systems. Most of my exploration rests on what marginalia add to the codex or the book as an object. Marking books is commonly seen as an act of tampering. But in my view, these marks also participate in some extent of meaning making for and around the book. We might see this, for example, in secondhand or antiquarian bookstores, using these marks to trace a history of provenance, of usage, or of ownership. These marks also commonly signify book use or engagement with the books and participate in some form of value making. For example, used books decrease in commercial value or monetary value, so we see this in secondhand bookstores and charity shops, or they might increase in this value if the marginalia has some archival or historical aspect to it, or some famous attribution like Coleridge. These value-making or meaning-making aspects lie outside of the text and the object itself. They precede its current aesthetic form. Given that the various reader markings in the platform space creates value and evidence of engagement, I would then like to frame them as what I've been teasing in the title, digital marginalia. They shape or alter the serials themselves, but more notably, the text that reaches the gatekeeping and acquisition channels of the book group are already marked by reader intervention, so paraphrasing a little bit of what Jackson had said. The culminated book, therefore, is already marked, albeit outside of its own material and medial conditions. Now, digital marginalia as a term is not new in the lexicon. Lauren Cameron in 2012 and Tully Burnett in 2014 have explored and used the term for the Kindle ebook. Both of them have used the popular highlights feature in the reader, in the ebook reader, as a quantified expression of attention. But they facilitate this attention, especially this attention for other readers, slightly differently than what Jackson probably had in mind. If you can see them in this slightly shoddy picture, it's surprisingly difficult to take a picture of the Kindle, sorry. These popular highlights are underlined passages or parts that are highlighted by at least 3 distinct users, and they appear within the text while reading as well, unless you switch off the feature, that is. This visible intrusion creates distractions within the text, while also facilitating an aspect of closer attention towards these portions. Tully Burnett approaches these as a juxtaposition of the hyper reading and the close reading cultures that are embedded in the digital landscape, and she uses Catherine Hale's concept to do this. And this is what I find even more relevant today in the Wattpad space, which is more dynamic than the ebook. Excuse me. Now we can draw direct analogies, both visually and functionally speaking, of these clusters of attention in the inline commenting systems. And the network nature of platform reading on Wattpad goes beyond numerical identifiers to make these clusters of numbers, to make these clusters of attention more subjective than the ebook. But my interest lies in exploring what marginalia can constitute, or what digital marginalia can constitute beyond these comments. So one avenue I find interesting to approach digital marginalia is the correlation with attention that I spoke about within the Kindle. And Wattpad uses some back-end metrics to make decisions on monetizing the serials. The number of reads that you see on the paratext of the serialized story that appears on the platform is actually constituted of unique readers and engaged readers. And Wattpad uses some, I'm not going to go into the genre considerations, which are also fun to think about, but Wattpad uses some generically defined thresholds of the engaged reader metrics to decide whether to monetize a story or not. Unique readers are views or readers that are counted only once, and it signifies the act of clicking on or accessing the text. Engaged readers are readers that have spent more than 5 minutes in a given frame of time on the story. So within the rubric of the platform, it's the engaged readers that signify attention or engagement. Now correlating this back to the attention, the correlation between attention and digital marginalia that I drew in the previous slide, we could make the argument that only the engaged readers metric, or only the metric that signifies attention within the platform, can be or should be categorized as digital marginalia. But I don't. My argument instead goes back to what I said in the previous slide. That the clusters of quantified highlighters in the Kindle not only signify attention by the highlighters themselves, but also facilitate or direct this attention for other readers through their intrusion on the text. So if I apply these visibility paradigms on the platform, the cumulative or the total number of reads directs or diverts, depending on where you stand, attention of the other users through the slush pile of the recommendation algorithms on the platform, through the slush pile of landing pages, search filters, home pages, etc. Because it is the cumulative metric that the platform makes visible. These are strategically employed by the platform infrastructure and consequently incentivize discovery as well as discoverability, which is pertinent in literary spheres populated by user-generated amateur writing like we see in Wattpad. This makes the engaged reader metric concomitant on this umbrella cumulative metric and adds to it, and therefore also helps in attention generation or facilitating attention. And therefore, I consider this apposite to or relevant to the rubric of digital marginalia as I'm proposing it. Hey, I'm under time. I did not expect that, sorry. So this slide shows you that I had no idea how to conclude this talk or how to even conclude a keynote. So I'm just going to make you all do the work and think about some of these topics that I was hoping to bring up. Last week in the Copenhagen Reading Research conference that some of you were there, Danielle and Danelle used the word provoke in the nicer way of the word, that is to incite and inspire thought and discussions. So I see Danelle, I don't know where Danielle is, but if I have your permission, which I hope you do because the rest of the script won't make sense, to use the same word, and I will try to culminate the keynote by provoking some thoughts or topics or questions in all of you. But what I have attempted to do with this talk so far is to think about how platform-first or digital-first publishers impact decisions in the contemporary book market. How platform reading processes, how platform engagement processes participate ostensibly or actually in decision-making processes or acquisition processes of the traditional book publishers. So looping all of these back into what I said, how I engage with this through the conference themes themselves, we could then think about collaboration. How does this make the bookmaking process more collaborative? Does it add the reader to the mix of the editor and the author? What avenues of access between authors, readers, traditional publishers do platforms like Wattpad then open? Do they make it easier to access the traditional book, or do they just maintain the traditional conventional barriers and hierarchies, just in newer forms? In what other ways does the serialization process, especially in digital spaces like we saw in the Wattpad platform, and however else you might interpret it, interact with the materiality of the book? In my presentation, I used the traditional book format as the culminating point. What other ways of interaction can we conceptualize? We could also think more about digital marginalia and how it frames attention in the digital sphere, and whether reader engagements and articulation within this paradigm is only just about signifying or articulating attention, which is significant in the attention economy we live in today. And something I'm still working on, what exactly is serialized reading? Is all reading serialized reading? I think serialized literatures and serialized publishing practices have a lot of scope to conceptualize the book at the intersection of the print and the digital. So, discuss. That's all I have. Thank you so much, and thank you for your attention. Oh my God, I'm very under time.
Can you hear me? No. Okay, here we go. Yes. Thank you very much, Swara. It was excellent. I'm the roving mic, so I will go where you call me. And yes, we have 2 questions. Give me a second.
watched that with the people participating. I really enjoyed it. Do you have any evidence that authors are interacting with the readers in the Marginalia and that the authors are actually potentially in subsequent episodes of stories changing things based on that feedback? Like, did the authors ever come in and go, yep, there is totally smart, I'm putting it in the next chapter for you?
Not in those, not exactly that clearly, but yes, we do have evidence. One of my chapters works with case studies, and I use a book, well, Entwine, what you just saw, but also a book that the author in her subsequent interviews have said that she used reader feedback to decide how much foreshadowing she should be doing. So, for example, there is a character who was supposedly going to die, and then you had a cluster of comments going, oh my god, this person is going to die, isn't he? Oh no, he's going to die. And then she eventually doesn't kill him off because she realized that people had kind of picked up on it. So yes, we do have some evidence.
Hello. Thank you for the paper. It was brilliant. I had worked in digital for a while myself, so it is very good to see that someone is actually going into this kind of studies. My question actually is revolving your question to you about collaboration, because in my personal case, in the publishing group I was working for, they are taking the digital in both sides of your research. Basically, what they are doing, they have an imprint that is basically publishing and so modifying the status of Wattpad stories, because it's only publishing hardcover editions of Wattpad stories, while at the same time actually engaging in the market of webtoons. And I think that really changes the way in which books are actually perceived by the readers when they, of course, become traditional books and, of course, engage in the traditional method of reading. So I really wanted to know your thoughts about this.
I'm going to be very cheeky here and say that Claire Parnell is probably a better candidate for this question, and she's not here, so, you know. But, sorry, so if I understand your question correctly, with their engagement with the webtoons market, which is web-based and which is largely online as well, I do not consider webtoon within my, my focus is only on the non-graphic level, the non-webtoon part of it. But from what I know and from what I've seen so far, I would say it's kind of emulating the same direction that I spoke about, the very fact that it's subsumed within a larger book group that eventually publishes these webcomics or these graphic novels that were originally very nicely settled in the online space and happy there, are now coming out as hardbacks and as paperback formats. So I do see the same direction there, but because I don't work with the online space of webtoons, I can't say, I'm sorry, more about that. But that's a really, really good question. Thank you. Yeah.
Hi, I have a sort of a related question. Thank you for your talk. It was amazing. I was curious if you could speak more about, you talked about the Wattpad Reddit group. And the reason I'm curious is because, you know, Wattpad kind of emerged as it's very similar to fanfiction.net and AO3. And of course, fanfiction community writers have been upset with people like James and Gray and other people who have done fan fiction with their community, then became commercialized publications. So, but with Wattpad, it seems like it's set up to do that. So what are users talking about or complaining about or happy about?
Exactly what you just said. Now, they are unhappy exactly about what you just said, where when Wattpad was just an uncommercialized fan fiction oriented platform, there were features like the personal messaging features, live comments and stuff like that. I didn't use it that much at that point in time, so I don't know. But for example, the personal messaging features where they could connect with the authors themselves to express appreciation, that is something that's been missed very much. I've seen a lot of comments really and asking everyone to move to AO3 instead or move to fan fiction instead. This doesn't work anymore. So the original audience base, I think, isn't really happy with this commercialized structure. And I am still, again, thinking more about this because I really like going into subreddits. It's like a guilty pleasure. But the DMs, for example, because they're in the back end, they don't really add anything to the attention, the visible paradigms of attention. It could be, I mean, it's a black box. I don't know what the Wattpad people were thinking when they did this, but maybe removing that also was a strict strategy to create, to direct attention in more visible ways that can be easily then leveraged for a very commercialized purpose. So what you just said, the short answer is exactly what the sub-editors are unhappy about. Yes.
My daughter reached for halfway with it.
I'm not making a good case for Wattpad at all here, am I?
Thank you, Swara, for that talk. It was fabulous. I kind of have a two-part question, if I may. First of all, I'm interested in the commercialized publication of Wattpad stories by traditional publishers. Are the same readers who have read it on Wattpad then going and reading the traditionally published book? And follow up to that, is there any sort of correlation between maybe they're reading the print edition more to get away from the digital of the serialized Wattpad, or if they're reading the digital more often because it's a comfortable platform for them?
That's actually a really good question. About the print one, I will think more about that. But again, from what I like to trace backwards because my case studies are all for books that have been published already. And what I've seen, for example, is Wattpad also preserves the book edition. So like the book text, it preserves it as something called Wattpad Books Edition. So you're right, maybe it's kind of a way of maybe leveraging on the platform readers who are more comfortable reading the books within that infrastructure and still, generating revenue on that printed text. So they preserve this at Wattpad Books edition, which is monetized, serial logic, monetized chapter by chapter, and many people go into that and read it. That's something I've seen. From what I've seen they also preserve the serials, which is called the Wattpad original editions. From the readers that I've seen there, I have seen a lot of lamentations over why do I have to purchase this thing now? Because I've already read this, and because they make some of the chapters free, I don't know how many, and monetize the rest. And this is only based on one book, so I'm not going to kind of generalize this, but you can see the metrics, the reader comments kind of dwindling through the monetized versus this is for the original serial, not for the Wattpad Books edition. So yeah, there's evidence somewhere there to at least take up on your point where some readers are more comfortable with the Wattpad platform affordances and reading the book through that. About the print, I haven't looked into the print sales. I haven't looked into how much something has sold. I do know that a lot of big 5 publishers are distributing these. Macmillan is a distributor. Penguin UK, you saw one of the screenshots, is a distributor. So from that end, there is a certain legitimization, I think, of the print format. So we can assume that people are reading. But I see this foray into, and especially because Wattpad specializes in YA, yes. So I see this foray into that space as trying to leverage more of that audience that's engaging with YA out into the print world and kind of using the platform to also engage that audience and expanding their audience base, so to speak. So these are, of course, just certain kind of formative thoughts. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's very interesting. Thank you.
We have, I'm afraid, just one question allowed, and I know that there were other hands raised. I think we have to take a coffee break. Thank you.
Oh, then I did not exceed the time.
It's fine.
Sorry, I did not. I did exceed the time. I'm so sorry.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you for your fascinating talk, and I'm quite curious about how do you process your data on digital marginalia, because they are all dynamic.
Yeah.
When you analyze this marginalia, there are many new marginalia keep emerging, and some old maybe disappear, right? So do you just use like a screenshot?
I use a lot of screenshots.
Yeah. But sometimes after you finish your analysis, maybe there are new marginalia, but with even opposite reviews or something like that.
That is very possible. It's very interesting to go into Goodreads reviews of the books. Just another rabbit hole if anyone was looking for it. But I closed my kind of analysis in the end of 2023, because if I didn't, I would never finish my PhD. Because you're right, it is very dynamic. It's constantly changing. But so that's one. That's how I make it a little bit more static, and I only consider that. about the dwindling bit, you are right. There are dropping engagements. I mean, at least there are engagements of readers dropping out of a story that you can sort of infer a little bit, like I said to her, like I said to Ellen before. Does that answer your question at all?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Okay,
What was the second part of your question, sorry? Yeah? Okay.
Yes, I think we need to close it. Thank you so much, Swara.